Dementia is one of the major challenges for our health and social care system, with close to 1 million people in the UK and close to 50 million people worldwide suffering from dementia. One of the tricky bits with dementia is that there is no cure. So a lot of the research has focused on either dementia prevention or specific populations of people with dementia. So those kind of in the very early stages, or those at the other end of the spectrum, so people with very advanced dementia living in care homes. But there's very little research kind of on general populations of people with dementia. As we see as clinicians, we are just trying to fill this gap using the CRIS database, because we can access the records of almost 20,000 people with dementia under the care of the South London Maudsley NHS Foundation Trust. So it makes kind of dementia research very equitable. So only 5% of people with dementia just have dementia. They rather have 4 or 5 additional comorbid conditions. And what really helps us here using the CRIS database are data linkages to other databases like general hospital databases or primary care databases, where we then can also find out a bit more about this, not only about this person's mental health, but also about their physical health. And this is also an important outcome I research: admissions to general hospitals. 2/3 will already have had an admission to a general hospital. And admissions to acute general hospitals are a very undesirable outcome for people with dementia, because the longer they stay there, their mobility gets reduced, they become frailer, and a lot of them never see their home again. So we are looking for ways in our field of research how we can avoid those hospital admissions. Another thing we are using for this research project is natural language processing, so trying to identify information from free text. And there are 2 things that are particularly interesting for us in dementia research. One is a score. It's called the Standard Mini-Mental State Examination, which tells us how well their cognition, of which memory is part of, still functions. And a lot of this is just only recorded in free text, so what the clinicians are writing, the events, the letters the clinicians are writing, rather than in a box they can fill in the electronic health record system. So we're kind of using natural language processing to identify those scores and then to measure cognitive and memory decline. And what we are also doing is we are not only researching dementia and Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of dementia, but also other forms, not as common forms of dementia, like for example dementia with Lewy bodies. There's no good code in our classification system to capture this diagnosis. So again, we're using natural language processing to find letters clinicians have written, or when clinicians have written in text using this diagnosis. Another project we were looking at is medications for kind of urinary incontinence, because some of them also work on the brain and can make the memory worse. And kind of what we were able to show is that basically people taking medications for urinary incontinence with effects on the brain were at a higher risk of mortality, so of earlier death, and also again at a higher risk of their memory getting worse. So, and this is just an example of kind of the CRIS database showing us how the real world works, real world data from 20,000 people with dementia, showing us that this might be the most important lever we need to pull to avoid falls in people with dementia, so that they don't need to go into hospital.